Hi, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of The Apparition, and welcome to my channel. We're going to be doing my July wrap-up, and I always start with my DNFs. I had 2 for this month. So the first one was Carry Me to My Grave by Christopher Golden, and unfortunately, I think I'm done with this author. I read The Hollows from him and I absolutely loved it. If you want all the Halloween vibes, I highly recommend that one. And I thought his other book, House of Last Resort, I thought that one was pretty good. It wasn't like a knockout, but I did enjoy it. But everything else I've read by Christopher Golden has just been okay. And when I started this one, I just got that same feeling that even if I read the entire novel, it was just going to be like a 3-star. And so I'm like, maybe I'm just not going to bother. And it did start out pretty slow, and I didn't realize it until I got an ARC copy that this was about vampires. And I don't know, I'm kind of particular when it comes to vampires, and this one just sounds like he's trying to get his mother's body to a certain spot because I'm guessing some kind of curse or something. But really, it's just him on the train with this other person trying to get his mother buried before these vampire or vampiric creatures get in the way of that, you know, and wreak all kinds of havoc and stuff. And so it just started out slow, and then it was like action, action, action. But I'm not always into action per se unless it's done a certain way and if there's not too much of it, because in my opinion sometimes that can get kind of boring, and it's just not my cup of tea when it comes to my horror novels. Like I said, I just thought it was okay. Like, it wasn't terrible and the writing's not bad, but I wasn't really interested that much, so I just decided to quit while I was ahead. So then my next DNF was When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy, and I've only read The Nestlings by this author and I really enjoyed it. I do own Mary, but I haven't read it yet. But this one just didn't really sound like something I would be interested in. When I read the premise, I'm just like, whatever. But then everybody started raving about it and saying that it was so good, and I have an Aardvark book subscription and they happen to have it as part of their picks for the month, and so I was like, okay, maybe I'll give it a try. Well, I gave it a try, and as I suspected, it's just not for me. First of all, in like the second chapter when we meet our main character, it says the F word like so much, and for me personally that's just too much. I just don't like that. I just rubs me the wrong way. I don't know. And other than that, when I first get introduced to the wolf and what the conflict is going to be, I felt it was pretty cheesy, and it was supposed to be like action-packed and gory and stuff, but I was almost rolling my eyes. I was just like, really? So I only made it like 35 pages in before I decided that this just really is not a book for me. But luckily, because people have been loving this book and raving about this book, I put my copy up on Pango Books, and within an hour I had sold it, so that was pretty cool. So then I'm going to be talking about some other NetGalley ARCs that I have received. I had 3 YA novels and then just 1 adult novel. So if you're not interested in YA books, maybe skip the next few minutes. But the first one was called Pretty Dead Things by Kelsey Cox. And I do own Party of Liars by this author, but I have not read it yet. But after reading this one, I'm extra excited for that one because I thought this one was a pretty solid read. And I did feel like this was more of a murder mystery than a thriller, but I feel like that's pretty common. Like, a lot of thrillers that I read aren't really thrillers. They're more like mysteries or maybe suspense or something. So I wouldn't necessarily classify this as a thriller, but by today's standards, it is a thriller because they just kind of lump all those things together nowadays. So anyways, this is about a beauty pageant, which, I don't know, can come off as a little bit too catty and too dramatic, but then at the same time it can also, if it's done right, the cattiness and the dramatic moments can enhance the book. And so it just depends on how it's done, and I felt like in this book it was done well. It was a little bit confusing in the beginning because we had a lot of POVs. There's like 7 different POVs. Well, and one, there might even be 8 because there's Abel, I think his name is. There's like an older man. We get like 1, maybe 2 chapters from his perspective as well. So in the beginning, I was just trying to figure out who these people were that I'm getting POVs for. And so it was a little bit confusing until I finally realized that really what it is we have these 3 teenage girls who are part of this beauty pageant. And then we have POVs from each of their mothers. And then we have an extra POV from this woman whose twin is the person that went missing or was murdered all of those years ago and is back in town trying to figure out what happened to her sister. So once I kind of realized and figured out that that was the POVs that we were getting, it made it a lot more smooth. And so while this isn't like a raving new favorite 5-star read for me, I did think it was a solid read and I did enjoy my time with it, and I would recommend it and give it 4 stars. I don't know if it is YA actually. I know I classified it as YA, but maybe it's not. I mean, it does have teenage perspectives, but it also has adult perspectives, so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not YA. The next 2 are for sure though. We have one called Paint Me Like Your Dead Girls, and this one I felt like was a pretty good, decent book. There's like 4 victims in this book, and I feel like the first 2 got a lot of screen time. We even got a couple of chapters from their perspective on when they went missing. But then like the next 2 victims after those 2, just kind of the ball got dropped and you really don't know anything about them. You don't get their perspective. You don't really know too much about what happened to them. And so it felt a little bit incomplete in that way. I wish that the author would have either gone all in and done all 4 victims, or just scaled it back and not really done any of them, because as it was, it just felt like it was a little bit incomplete. And I was able to guess who the killer was, which I don't know, sometimes it's a bummer, and then other times if the book is good enough, I don't really care because I just really enjoyed the book. But in this case, I was kind of bummed out to know that I did know who the killer was. But it is what it is. I mean, I'm fairly good at guessing them at this point in time, and so it's not really a detriment to the book. You know, I should just take my props and say I'm good at figuring out who the murderer is. I don't know whether that's true or not. But so like I said, sometimes it doesn't make or break a book for me if I know who the killer is, but sometimes I am kind of like saddened that I wasn't surprised. But for the most part, I thought this was a pretty good, and I would also give it 4 stars. And then we have How Not to Renovate a Haunted House, and this is actually a romance. And I love a good haunted house book, and so having a sweet romance on top of it is just the icing on the cake for me. And I thought that the haunted house aspect and the romance was done equally well, and I think that's pretty rare. I feel like when people are trying to mash genres, one side of it is done better than the other or gets more screen time than the other, but I felt like it was pretty well balanced in this book, and I feel like they both had enough screen time. They were both fleshed out enough that I really enjoyed the romance and the haunted house aspect. Again, I did think the haunted house part was slightly predictable, but at the same time, I'm not sure how much it was meant to fool you, if you know what I mean. So I kind of figured who the ghost was pretty much from the beginning, but it was sufficiently creepy in the beginning, and like I say, the romance was really sweet and really good, and this book had a lot of heart, and I really liked this one and would probably give it 5 stars. And for me personally, romance is kind of a genre that's hard to get 5 stars on. Well, maybe I'm lying, I don't know. I can't really think of how many 5 stars I've given romance, but I feel like I don't give them out very often. And this one, there might have been like one aspect of the book that maybe would knock it down, but the more I thought about it, I was like, I'm just going on pure emotion on how I felt reading this book and how much I enjoyed it while I was reading it. And if I'm basing it purely on that, then I would think that this is a 5-star read. And I thought the main male interest was just so sweet and so cute, and I just really liked their dynamic together and how he would lift her up, and I just thought it was really sweet and really good. And then the next one that I read was Penance of Crow, and this takes place on an island in Ireland. And speaking of which, my parents went to the UK recently, and they went to Ireland, and they gave me this necklace. I don't know how well you can see that because it's pretty small, but I think it's supposed to be like the Trinity from like a church or something. But yeah, really cool. I was really happy and surprised that my parents brought me back a souvenir, so that was fun. This one I have mixed feelings about because on the one hand, I thought it was well written. I liked the characters. Our main character is looking after her lassies, which are this group of 4 girls who are being abused or manipulated or controlled by people in their lives, and so she's kind of looking after them. And so I really liked our main character, and I really liked the themes of this book, and I really enjoyed the story for the most part, but at the same time it felt very predictable and very formulaic to me, and so in that respect I didn't really love it. And then this is set in modern times, but it definitely has the feel of historical fiction, so even though it's set in modern times, if you don't like historical fiction, then you might be surprised or maybe even disappointed by this one. I'm not really sure why she's set it in modern times because it really was unnecessary. It didn't really need to be set in modern times, in my opinion. But yeah, if you're going into this thinking it's going to be modern, I want you to go in with the right expectations to know that all the vibes, the way they talk, the way they act, the fact that they have this priest on the island that's kind of like the leader, I guess, and has a lot of sway on this island in this small town, because really on this island there's only three families, or three main families, and everybody just branches off from them, so very, very small. And so it just really has the setting and the feel of a historical fiction novel. But outside of that, I did think this was a well-written, good story, even if it was predictable. So I'd probably give it about 3.5 stars. And then before I move on to my physical copybooks, I just wanted to mention a graphic novel that I read, and that was Sheets. And this is actually part of a trilogy, so this is the first one. And then we have Delicates, and then Lights. And so I already owned the first copy. I got this at a library sale a year or two ago, and then when I took my kids to the library this summer, I saw that they had the next two, so I thought this would be a good time to finally get to this trilogy, and I really, really liked it. I was a little bit surprised to find it in the middle grade section of the library because the themes and the topics in this book are pretty heavy, and so it seems like it's made for a more mature audience. And I think it's middle grade simply because our main character is in 7th grade going into 8th grade, and so her age puts her in that category. But I think older teenagers and obviously adults would also enjoy this because, like I said, the topics in it is pretty heavy. I'm thinking like suicide, or murder, or the death of a parent, or, things like that are maybe a little bit more mature for certain audiences. But I thought this was really, really cute and really, really fun, even though it was also extremely sad at the same time. So we have this little ghost named Wendell, and he drowned when he was a little boy, and he makes his way back to the land of the humans, and he can only be seen when he's wearing a sheet over himself. And so our main character, she runs a laundromat. I guess her family technically runs the laundromat, but she recently had her mother pass away, and her dad is so grief-stricken and devastated by the death of his wife that he just kind of checked out. And so she's kind of single-handedly taking care of the family business and also taking care of her little brother, and I just feel so bad for her and the stuff she has to go through. Anyway, she meets this little ghost that kind of helps her and different things, and then as you get into the story, it has a lot to do with about like friendship and stuff. And so anyways, I highly recommend this trilogy. I thought it was really cute and really fun, and I would highly recommend this graphic novel. Okay, now let's get into my physical book, starting with How to Fake a Haunting. And this one was a very intriguing premise because it's about a woman who wants to scare her husband away because she knows that if she gets a divorce, she's not going to come off on the good side of things because his family is rich and can hire the best lawyers, and she's terrified that he's going to get custody of their child, and he is an alcoholic, and she really doesn't want him to have any type of parental control over her daughter. And so her and her friend come up with this idea that if they pretend like their new home was haunted, maybe he'll be scared away, and if he leaves, it's like he's abandoning them, and so they don't have to worry about it. But this kind of leads to a real haunting. So I thought that the premise was really, really cool, and I love haunted house books, and I thought this was a really fun book. However, at the end, when they kind of talk about the real haunting and how and why it happened, and my main character makes a certain decisions, I just felt it was a little bit confusing. Not confusing in the sense that I don't understand what happens, but confusing in the sense of like if it actually works with the story, if you know what I mean. So I'm just not sure the motivations made complete sense. But outside of that, I did think this was a decent book and thought it was a lot of fun, and I'd give it 4 stars. And then we have The Corpse Queen, and this is a YA novel that I'm so happy to finally have read because I actually used this picture as part of my profile picture. And the reason why I did this is I just thought the cover was really cool, and if somebody wanted to call me the Corpse Queen, that'd be pretty cool. But I had never actually read the book. It's been sitting on my shelves for years, and I finally got around to reading it. And luckily for me, I did end up enjoying it. So this is a historical novel about the time in history when people would steal bodies to use for medical students and surgeons to be able to practice and research and different things. And so our main character, she has grown up in an orphanage, but her parents pass away and she ends up going off to her aunt who is rich, and she is part of this world, and she's actually the one that they call the corpse queen. And so she kind of becomes this body snatcher or resurrectionist, and later decides that she actually wants to become a surgeon, even though at the time women weren't really supposed to be surgeons because, you know, we're women and we're stupid apparently. But anyways, I really liked this one a lot. I love this time in history and I love the macabreness of it, but our main character did kind of drive me crazy at times. For the most part, I liked it, but there are a few instances where I was kind of like, I don't know about that. But for the most part, I did like her character, and I was able to guess who the killer was, because there's this killer called the Knifeman who has been killing bodies and then taking like unique medical oddities from them or from their corpses. Like if you had a vestigial tail or something like that, then he would kill you and then take your tail. Or, you know, maybe you had a big wide forehead that's kind of distorted or whatever, like they would kill you for your body. Or, you know, they fought over this body that was like this giant of a man, you know, and so they're trying to figure out who's terrorizing New York. I was able to guess who the killer was, which again, sometimes a bummer and sometimes isn't, but there was a twist in this that I didn't see coming, so it was still able to surprise me. So I would probably give this one maybe even 4.5. And then we have Beth is Dead, and this is also a YA novel, and this is actually a modern retelling of Little Women, and I adore the story of Little Women. And so I was really excited when I saw this at Target one day, because this is about Beth, but instead of dying of sickness like she does in the book, in this book she's murdered. And so the rest of the sisters are trying to figure out what happened to their sister and if they're to blame for her death. And it's just so fun. I just loved this one. I would give this one 5 stars. I thought it was so creative and so well done, and I loved all the characters, and it just gave me all the good fuzzy feelings that I like from Little Women. Well, I say fuzzy feelings, but it's not really fuzzy feelings because this is a murder mystery. But, you know, it just gives you that comforting warmth when you're reading classics, you know, or when you're reading a retelling of a book that you love. You know, it just has all that nostalgia feel to it. But obviously it's refreshing and modern and completely different in its own right. But yeah, I thought this one was so much fun, and I would highly recommend it if you're also a fan of Little Women. And then I read The Ending Writes Itself, and this one hasn't been getting very good reviews, but me personally, I really liked this one. I really like books about writers, and this one had all the fun meta-ness of going along with authors and how they're talking about the writing process and talking about, you know, all the things that come with that profession. And so you have this group of writers who are tasked with writing the ending, are tasked with ghostwriting the ending to this very famous series, because the author has died. And so the publishing house and the editor, they don't want the world to know about his death yet. They want a few days to hurry and end it so they can pretend that he wrote it before his death so that they could get more money for it, because this has been a long awaited ending to this series, and this finale has been clamored for by its fans, and it's already late. He's like 18 months late on getting this book in, and so they're like, crap, we really need this done. And so they compile this group of writers to come to this island, and whoever writes the best ending gets to ghostwrite it, and they get all this money. I think it's like $100,000 or something. No, I think it's like $1 million. And then they also get a book deal for their own series. So in some ways I could see why people didn't really like it, because it doesn't really, how do I explain it? It is a murder mystery, but at the same time it's very straightforward, and so you're not necessarily guessing anything more than you're just going along for the ride, and some people don't like that. And I don't know if I was able to predict who the killer was, because I honestly wasn't trying to figure it out. I was just along for the ride. I was just reading it. I was just going with the flow. And sometimes if I'm able to do that, I enjoy the book better. You know, if I'm not trying to figure out who it is the whole time, because usually I can figure it out. And so I just lucked out in the case of this one where I just went along with it. And so when it happened, I wasn't like, oh, I knew it, but I also wasn't like shocked by it either. Like when I found out who it was, I it's just like, oh, okay, makes sense. So I don't know. This one, like I said, it's not like the best thing I've ever read, but I kind of want to give it 5 stars just because of my enjoyment of reading it. I just really liked the premise. I really liked going with the authors. I thought all of the characters were their own unique person. They weren't cardboard cutouts or anything. You know, they all had their own distinct voice. And I don't know, I just thought it was fun. I just thought it was a good time. So I really liked this one. So when I sat down to do my July wrap up, I sat down to talk about this book, How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates, but I realized that the amount of stuff I wanted to talk about could be its own video, and I really didn't want this video to be like 45 minutes long. So by the time I ended up finishing my wrap-up video, I was like, I'm just gonna cut it and I'm going to have this be its own video so that if you want to do a deep dive into this and you want to hear all my thoughts into it, you can go ahead and watch that video. If you just want to know if I liked it or not, then you could watch my wrap up, you know, and know if I liked it. So I'm going to be doing a whole nother video on this next week if you want to tune in for it. This is ironically the first book I read this month, but it's the last one I'm going to talk about. So if you don't know, this is supposed to be a blend of genres. So it's supposed to be a slasher mixed with a romance. And so we have a main character who is going to speed dating with their friend, but then the lights go out, and when the lights come back on, there's somebody who has been murdered, and it turns into a slasher. So that's all the books I have to talk about. So please subscribe to my channel if you feel so inclined. Give me a thumbs up if you liked this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya!